My name is Ethan Parker. On the surface, I have it all: a thriving career, a beautiful wife, and two wonderful children. I'm the head of research at one of New York's top investment banks, a position I worked hard to secure. The work is demanding, but the rewards are more than enough to justify the long hours. I live in a spacious apartment with a view of the skyline that never fails to impress. Victoria, my wife, is an executive at a leading marketing firm. Her career has always been on a sharp upward trajectory. We were both in our prime, confident in the paths we had chosen, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. She's a stunning woman, always poised, always graceful. Her beauty isn't just in her appearance, it's in the way she carries herself. It's hard not to be proud of her. We've been married for nearly 12 years, and although there have been moments of tension here and there, mostly due to the pressures of our jobs, I always believed we were in sync. Our marriage had its occasional ups and downs, but like every couple, we managed. At least that's what I thought. Our children, Lucas and Emma, are growing up fast. They both attend an excellent private school, and we make sure they have everything they need. Dinner time has always been an event, a moment where the four of us come together and share our day. In many ways, it was the perfect family. There was always a sense of completeness. But lately something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was a distance between Victoria and me that hadn't been there before. She seemed distracted. Her attention wasn't entirely on me or the kids anymore. Maybe it was just the stress of her job. Or maybe I was imagining things. I convinced myself that it was nothing to worry about, that life would get back to normal. Then came the night that changed everything. It started out like any other evening. After a grueling day at the office, I came home to a quiet apartment. Victoria had worked late, and the kids were at their grandparents' house for the weekend. The silence felt oddly comforting. I made a drink and settled into the couch, flipping through emails, trying to unwind. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Victoria. I opened it, expecting a simple text about her day. But what I saw made my heart stop. The message wasn't from her. It was a string of texts between her and someone named Richard. I didn't need to read them all, but I did anyway. The words were sharp, intimate. They shared plans to meet up later that evening. The tone of their conversation was too familiar, too casual, as if they had been doing this for quite some time. Richard. I knew the name well. Richard Palmer. A senior manager at my bank. I'd seen him at meetings and social gatherings, but we weren't close. Just another colleague. The thought of him being involved with Victoria, it made my stomach turn. My mind raced. I thought about the late nights Victoria had been working. The mysterious meetings. The distance I had sensed but couldn't quite define. And now this, proof of her infidelity staring back at me from my phone screen. I felt numb at first. A deep, hollow ache spread through my chest, as if the floor had been ripped out from under me. I should have been angry, furious even. But instead I felt a strange calmness. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a violation. I thought about confronting her, demanding answers right then and there. But something inside me stopped me. This wasn't just about her and me anymore. It wasn't just about the pain she had caused. It was about something deeper, something more. I had spent years building my career, building this life. I wasn't going to let it crumble because of one mistake. No, I would not be a victim of this. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down, nor would I let Richard off the hook. I had access to everything I needed to make them both pay. I knew the bank systems inside and out. I had the power to uncover secrets, to expose the things people didn't want anyone to see. It would take time, but I could bring them down. Not through a public confrontation. That would be too easy. No, I would do this my way, quietly, strategically, and in a way that would ruin them both far more than any words could. The pieces were already falling into place. I didn't need to act out of anger. I didn't need to shout or cry. I just needed to wait. And when the time came, I would make sure they both regretted ever crossing me. But for now, I kept my emotions in check. I put my phone down and let the silence envelop me. Tomorrow I would begin. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions, working long hours at the bank, speaking to clients, attending meetings. I kept up the facade of the perfect life, smiling and shaking hands, all while the secret gnawed at me from the inside. I couldn't shake the image of those texts from Victoria and Richard, nor the gnawing sense of betrayal that festered deeper every moment. I could hear Victoria moving around the house when I got home each night. The soft clatter of pots and pans in the kitchen, the hum of the television in the living room. But even when she was right there, next to me, it felt like we were a million miles apart. She still hadn't said a word about the texts, and I wasn't about to bring it up. In a strange way, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't reacting emotionally. I wasn't allowing myself to be weak. I had a plan, a purpose, and I would stick to it. I told myself I would wait for the right moment to strike. But that didn't make the quiet, creeping anger go away. One night, after another exhausting day at work, I came home to an unexpected situation. Victoria was already home, sitting at the dining table, a glass of wine in hand. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. "Hey, Ethan," she said softly, almost too casually. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. I could feel the tension in the air. Her eyes flickered to my face, then quickly away as if she was searching for something in my expression. The silence between us stretched. I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, but I wasn't ready yet. Not now. Not when everything was so raw. Instead, I smiled faintly and sat down across from her, picking up my own glass. We both sipped the wine, neither of us speaking. "So, how was work?" she asked after a beat, her tone slightly forced. "It was fine," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "Busy as usual. How about you?" She hesitated, a flicker of something in her eyes. I didn't know if it was guilt or just nerves, but it didn't matter. I wasn't here for small talk. I had other plans. I got a promotion today," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "A big one. The CEO called me into his office. He said he wants me to head up the new marketing division." I stared at her, the hollow ache in my chest turning into something more sinister. She was so proud of herself, and yet here I was, knowing what she was doing behind my back. Knowing how empty her success really was. "Congratulations," I said, forcing the words through my clenched jaw. "That's great, Victoria." But it wasn't. It didn't feel great at all. All I could think about was how her success had come at the expense of our marriage, at the expense of us. She was moving ahead in her career while I was stuck here, stuck with the bitter reality of what I had uncovered. She gave me a hesitant smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a pause, a beat of silence where neither of us spoke. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind of silence that made the walls close in around you. Victoria set her glass down, standing up. "I think I'll head to bed early tonight. Big day tomorrow." I nodded, watching her leave the room without a second glance. The tension hung heavy in the air. She wasn't even pretending anymore. I wasn't sure if she knew I knew, or if she was just too caught up in her own lies to care. I finished my glass of wine, letting the bitter taste linger in my mouth. Tomorrow would be the day I started pulling the strings. Tomorrow I would use the skills I had spent years honing. Tomorrow I would expose the web of corruption that Victoria and Richard had spun. But for now, I sat there alone in the dimly lit kitchen, staring out the window at the city that never slept. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was still quiet, and Victoria had already left for work. She'd probably told herself she could keep up the charade, pretending that everything was fine just like I had. But I wasn't fooled anymore. I couldn't pretend that things were fine, not when I knew the truth. I had to act fast. The longer I waited, the more I risked losing my opportunity. Richard and Victoria were careful, too careful, but I had one thing they didn't: access. My position at the bank gave me a level of control and influence that few others could claim. I had the power to look behind the curtain and see what was really going on. I sat down at my desk, my fingers moving over the keyboard. The bank's network was vast, but I knew it inside and out. I didn't need to hack my way in. I knew how to navigate the systems, find the information I needed without leaving a trace. A few keystrokes and I was in. The first thing I did was access the internal transactions for the last 6 months. It didn't take long for me to find the irregularities. I didn't need to understand every detail to know that something was off. There were large, unaccounted-for transfers between shell companies. Transactions that made no sense, especially for a firm with such a reputation. The names didn't surprise me. Richard's name appeared multiple times, and so did Victoria's. I paused for a moment, letting the weight of it all sink in. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about something much bigger. The bank, my bank, was involved in massive corruption, all under the guise of legitimate financial activity. These weren't just small transactions slipping through the cracks. These were major funds being laundered, clients being defrauded. And it wasn't just Richard and Victoria. They had been working with others. This was a conspiracy, a carefully crafted system to exploit the very people who trusted us with their money. I clicked through the documents, collecting the evidence I would need. Names, dates, amounts. Everything was laid out in front of me, like pieces of a puzzle I had been unknowingly putting together. But it wasn't enough to simply gather the facts. I needed to make sure I had everything, every transaction, every email, every conversation that tied them to the corruption. Only then could I expose them for who they really were. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I felt. I knew this wasn't just about getting back at Victoria or Richard. It was about justice. About stopping them before they hurt anyone else. But I had to be careful. I couldn't just send this to the authorities. That would be too obvious, too reckless. I had to make sure the message was clear and the consequences devastating. I would leak everything to the right people. People who could bring them down without anyone knowing it was me. I couldn't afford to be caught in the crossfire. It was time to plan the next step. The evidence I had gathered would be my weapon. But before I did anything, I needed one more thing. Proof of the final transaction, the one that would tie Victoria and Richard directly to the heart of the corruption. I couldn't rest until I had that. Later that evening, I sat in front of my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face. I was on the hunt for the last piece of the puzzle. After hours of searching, I finally found it, an encrypted email exchange between Victoria and Richard. It was about a large deal they had orchestrated, one that involved not just the bank but several high-profile clients. The email confirmed everything I had suspected. They had been actively manipulating the financial markets to line their pockets. The email was damning, and now I had it all. I saved the file and began drafting a report. I knew what I had to do. I would send it anonymously to the regulatory authorities, ensuring that no one would ever trace it back to me. The media would pick it up. The scandal would unfold and their lives would be destroyed. I sat back in my chair, taking a deep breath. There was no turning back now. I had prepared for this moment, and now it was here. The plan was in motion. Richard and Victoria were going to fall. The next few days felt like a blur. I had everything in place. The evidence was meticulously organized, and I had sent it off to the regulatory authorities under an untraceable alias. The media picked up on the leak quickly, and it didn't take long for the storm to escalate. The first report hit the financial news channels early one morning. The headline read, "Massive Financial Fraud Uncovered at Leading Investment Bank." My pulse quickened as I read the article. They had already named the bank, but it was clear from the early stages that they had no idea who was behind the breach. It was only a matter of time before the full scale of the scandal unfolded. I couldn't help but feel a sick sense of satisfaction. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The people I had once trusted, the people who had treated me like a pawn in their game, were about to be exposed for what they truly were: fraudsters, thieves, and manipulators. Victoria and Richard's names hadn't surfaced yet, but I knew it wouldn't be long. The authorities would trace the trail and they would eventually get to them. I wasn't worried about that. I had made sure that every piece of evidence was airtight. There was no way they could escape. But I had to remain vigilant. I had to keep a low profile, especially now that the media frenzy was growing. Over the next couple of days, I watched as the reports flooded in. The scandal was like wildfire, spreading across every major news outlet. It wasn't just about the money they had stolen or the lives they had ruined, it was the scale of it all. This wasn't just a few bad apples, this was a systematic breach of trust. As the media honed in on the details, more and more names came to light. Victoria's and Richard's involvement was almost inevitable. Then came the whispers in the office. Employees were talking, trying to piece together what had happened, but no one seemed to know for sure who had leaked the information. I made sure to stay in the background, keeping my face neutral, my movements calculated. I wasn't going to let anyone suspect me, not yet. On the fourth day it happened. The authorities released a statement confirming that both Victoria and Richard were under investigation. The exact nature of their involvement was still being reviewed, but it was clear that their actions had cost the bank millions. The fact that they had manipulated accounts, misled clients, and embezzled funds was now in the public eye. I felt no relief, no joy in seeing their downfall. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about watching them squirm. What I had done was about justice. It was about balance. It was about making sure that the world would see who they really were. And as much as it hurt to watch the woman I loved fall from grace, I knew I had made the right decision. The media pounced on them, digging into their pasts, uncovering every mistake they had made, every lie they had told. Victoria was painted as a woman who had let her ambition blind her to the truth, while Richard was portrayed as a ruthless manipulator, using his position to exploit the system for personal gain. The more the media exposed, the more they realized how deep the corruption ran. At night, I couldn't escape the images in my head, the ones of Victoria's face, the way she looked at me with that same vacant expression, as if she couldn't feel the weight of what was happening. She was losing everything, her job, her reputation, and soon enough, her freedom. And yet, I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. By the time the investigation reached its peak, Victoria was summoned for questioning. She was escorted from the office by security, her face pale, her hands shaking. The fall from grace was swift and brutal. The life she had built, the career she had prided herself on, was crumbling around her. I watched from a distance as she was escorted out, but I didn't approach. I had no interest in confrontation. What was done was done. Richard, too, was forced into hiding. He was fired immediately and had a warrant issued for his arrest. It was a spectacle, a collapse of two people who had thought they were untouchable. They weren't, of course. No one ever is. And I stayed silent. I let them burn in their own fire. The worst part? No one knew it was me. The perfect execution. The anonymous tip, the flawless evidence, everything had fallen into place. I was no hero. I hadn't done this out of kindness. I had done this out of necessity. I had done it to regain control over my life, to restore the integrity I had lost in the chaos of my marriage. The bank launched an internal investigation, but by that time, it was clear that the damage had already been done. The public outcry was deafening, and the financial fallout was unavoidable. The scandal reverberated through the halls of power, reaching all the way to the top. It wasn't just Richard and Victoria who were under fire. The entire system was now under scrutiny. And through it all, I remained quiet, watching from the shadows as the world burned. Weeks passed since the storm had broken. The scandal continued to echo throughout the financial world, its ripples spreading far and wide. Victoria and Richard's downfall was inevitable, but the consequences of their actions reverberated beyond just the two of them. The bank's reputation was shattered, clients pulled their investments and the company's stock plummeted. It felt like the end of an era, and I watched from the sidelines as the chaos unfolded. But while the world around me was in turmoil, I had moved forward. I had made my decision long ago, not to dwell in the wreckage of what had been, but to embrace a new life, one that aligned with the person I had become through all this. The anger had subsided, replaced by a quiet sense of satisfaction. I had gotten justice not just for me but for everyone who had been hurt by their greed. But now it was time for me to rebuild my life. I left the bank quietly, a clean break. There was no dramatic exit, no announcement. I simply walked out one day, never to return. The world of high finance that I had once dominated no longer had a place for me. And I was fine with that. I had already begun a new chapter, consulting. Financial security and integrity had always been my driving force, and now I could help others protect their assets, their investments, their businesses, without the corruption that had tainted the industry. I was no longer tied to the toxic environment of the bank. Instead, I became a consultant for businesses that needed guidance on financial security, risk management, and compliance. I wasn't doing it for fame or fortune. I did it because I believed in it, because I could sleep at night knowing I was helping build something sustainable and honest. It was a small operation at first, just me and a couple of trusted colleagues. But it didn't take long for my reputation to grow. Word spread about the former head of research from the bank who had blown the whistle on one of the largest financial frauds in history. People trusted me because I had integrity. And that was more than enough. The work was fulfilling. It wasn't about the money. It was about knowing that I was making a real difference. I helped businesses navigate the murky waters of financial regulations, uncover fraud, and secure their future. It was hard work, but it was honest. Every deal, every consultation was a step toward rebuilding my own life. And then there were the children. Lucas and Emma were growing up quickly. Their lives were no longer overshadowed by the tension between Victoria and me. I had more time to spend with them, to be a father to them in ways I hadn't been before. Our weekends were filled with trips to the park, museum visits, and quiet afternoons at home. I hadn't realized how much I had missed those moments until they returned. Victoria, on the other hand, was a shadow of the woman I once knew. Her life had crumbled in the wake of her own mistakes. She had lost everything, the job, the prestige, and the trust of everyone around her. The media had destroyed her, and the court trials weren't any better. She faced charges, but I didn't pay attention to the details anymore. I had no interest in the aftermath of her downfall. Occasionally, I would hear from mutual friends. Some sympathized with her, others expressed frustration at what she had done. But I knew better. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had found peace. It wasn't the peace I had once imagined, a life with Victoria by my side and everything perfectly in place. No, this peace came from something deeper. It came from knowing that I had taken control of my life, that I had made the difficult decisions that led me to a place of personal integrity and fulfillment. The work I did now, helping others secure their financial futures and navigate the complexities of the system, was more than just a career. It was a redemption. It was a way for me to give back, to help those who needed it, without the shadow of corruption hanging over me. And though the wounds of the past would never fully heal, I had learned how to live with them. I had found my own sense of balance and purpose in a world that had once seemed so chaotic. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it didn't need to be. I had my family. I had my work. And for the first time in a long time, I had the integrity I had once thought was lost forever. I closed my eyes one evening, a soft smile playing on my lips as I watched Lucas and Emma laughing together in the next room. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.